there was a big federal and local response to the disaster. It was led by FEMA, EPA participated, lots of other federal agencies, CNMI local government was on board. That was 8 months ago. FEMA still has a large team there, so this was a major response. But today, our focus really isn't on the response. Today, our focus is going to be on recovery. What we're trying to do is look at the question, what can we do now, right now, and in the next couple of years, so that when the next U2 hits, we don't have the same kind of devastation, not the same kind of impacts. So, we're structuring this panel in 2 different subsessions. So the first session is going to be a sort of case study. It's going to be a presentation on bringing back water after the water service was out. And then that will be with Lieutenant Commander Travis Faith. And then the second session, this is going to be where the fun gets going, is we're going to have a panel. There's going to be no presentations. It's just going to be a conversation, questions and answers about what we do next. How do we go from here? And we'll do some talking, and then we're going to have an even more fun part, which is we're going to include the audience in that. So that's what we're going to do. And first of all, before we start, actually, I'm going to Romy, go ahead and hit. We're going to have a video that Lieutenant Governor Arne Palacios brought, and we'll go ahead and watch that.
To our people, I know that it's hard. I know that we're all going through this together, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for giving that extra effort to work together and collaborate with each other. It's one love, one family, Binayza, familia, and let's keep CNMI strong, and let's build it stronger together.
Wow, it just got really dark in here. Okay, so that I think helps put things in perspective. And one more to put in perspective, I'm going to introduce Lieutenant Commander Travis Spaeth. Travis Spaeth currently manages the Safe Drinking Water Program at the CNMI BECQ. He is a U.S. Public Health Service engineer on a U.S. EPA detail to the CNMI. Prior to his move to BECQ, he was an engineer at the CNMI Commonwealth Utilities Commission, which is the main power and water utility in the CNMI. And during and after U2, Lieutenant Commander Spaeth was a focal point for the water response team, which was composed of both federal and local CNMI responders. And that means he had a very important role in terms of trying to bring back, and not just trying, but bringing back water service to the CNMI. So with that, let's please welcome Travis Spaeth.
All right, thank you, John. As you said, I was an engineer for the Commonwealth Utilities Corporation, so they had a major role in the recovery effort, obviously, after Super Typhoon Yutu. You gotta give credit to Brian Bearden. He actually helped with this presentation. I almost didn't make it to the workshop this week, so I gotta give him a little credit because he was gonna present for me. And then Loya Adelaide, who works in BCQ, also had made a presentation. He did not make it either. This is just the generic disclaimer. This is the picture of U2, which you saw, the aftermath from the great video you just saw, so you kind of got the severity of it all. So what after the disaster? People don't really care about power. They don't care about stuff. They want water. They need to clean. They need drinking water. It's always the key point in a disaster from everyone I've been a part of. And as you can see, they did a survey right after, and 75% said water was the key component they needed back. So what do? Well, you start water restoration as immediately as possible. That started with inspections. So we had to do assessments of all the assets, both in Tinian and Saipan. And then we had to go reassess them when the FEMA crews showed up and decide where we can put generators, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, we had shut off tanks across the island prior to the storm, knowing it was going to hit us, and we had to shut off power to all the wells. So we had to start setting up water filling stations for the people to get water, at least to flush toilets and cook or whatever they needed for. And then it became the generator installation aspect. And this was a big factor in recovery, obviously. The severity of the storm, especially the southern part of Saipan and other areas, power generation was not going to be back quickly. So we needed to get backup generators to support. And that was a big partnership between FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, CUC, and then federal contractors as well. So here's a graph of the water production. Typhoon Yutu hit on the 24th and 25th of October. Obviously, we had zero production for quite a few days. But then you can see it kind of really spiked up quite quickly. And that's mainly due to the support of FEMA. FEMA had generators basically loaded and ready to go that showed up shortly after the storm. And it became just assessing the sites and installing these generators. That being said, you could probably shift that line a whole week shorter if CUC had their own generators, which is part of the resiliency in the future that we'll discuss later. But that being said, many of you might be familiar with Typhoon Soledor. It hit in 2015. Basically, we made a comparison, and really, we did much better with U2 in the recovery, bringing water back. As you can see, it was a big improvement from YouTube, but not truly prepared. Having generators on the critical wells across Taipan would have drastically improved the shutdowns. It would drastically improve people's lives immediately. It would allow people to flush toilets, to clean up their house after the disaster. So a big push is to get these generators installed. And there actually is a federally grant that's, actively being sent Solidor that needs to be installed. Or basically you can change the weeks of water restoration to days, which would be the goal. The challenge is maintaining all these generators. Saipan did have a few generators out there in the water system, but none of them are working on the water side. The wastewater side, they had much more generators that worked. Basically, the wastewater aspect was not barely affected at all from the typhoon due to generators installed. Then what we did, as we got wells online, whether it be power distribution or FEMA, we have to start hacking the distribution network. Obviously, we ran it out to the filling stations right away, but we actually were able to work quite quickly once we had production, and we were able to move water literally all the way around the island from the water source we had. It was a lot of operations work, and the engineers were out turning gate valves, the operators. It was a total team effort. The other thing that you don't realize is that there was a ton of broken pipes. People's homes, a lot of their pipes ripped off the walls or whatever. So we had to shut off water meters all over the island because we couldn't afford to let it just run into somebody's broken down house. So it was kind of a major impact that way. And then as the restoration efforts commenced even more, Public Works, the mayor's office, they'd be out picking up debris. Well, they might accidentally pull a water meter out of the ground when they're doing that. And so it was a pretty interesting time frame for everybody at CUC. And this graph just kind of shows you, like, normally they repair about 100 leaks a month. If you see November 2018, they repaired over 500 leaks due to the typhoon. Storage tanks, obviously those are a key component. There's major damage. With the tank in Tinian, lost the entire roof. In Saipan, multiple tanks the steel tanks had damage like this. Basically, CUC has went away from steel tanks. We don't construct it anymore. So, and I think even Guam's in that same boat where they're basically just going to concrete tanks in the future. They're more resilient and more effective. And where we live, you got to consider that. The biggest component about the typhoon recovery that I was a big part of is the water task force team. This was a team of CUC engineers, CUC power guys, FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers. It was a big collaboration. DOD was a big part of this. Basically, it was set up to, like, where do we need to move water? Who needs water? And this came from not just CUC water, this was drinking water. So where do we put these water buffaloes around the island so people get water? Where do we send the water bottles that are coming in? So this team did that. Spin-off of that, as the typhoon recovery went on, it's like, hey, what about all the restaurants? Are they having safe water for their food and stuff? And a spin-off was that PIEC started sampling, with the help of the Public Health Service and Region 9 EPA, started sampling restaurants. Well, and it became a big issue because a lot of restaurants had E. coli in the water then, because they weren't properly cleaning their tanks or whatever. So it was a big public health impact that we really didn't, it had never happened in Saipan before, I don't think. So they didn't normally sample restaurants. So there's no even agreement on how to relay information to the public. So, like, we were getting information about E. coli, but we couldn't, like, they didn't want to shut down restaurants because they didn't want to create a panic. So it was a really interesting thing to be a part of that aspect. Yeah, like this says, it's, as a non-traditional response when it comes to sampling restaurants, the damage to plumbing, et cetera, et cetera. So here's just a tidbit of the restaurant sample. They sampled 176 restaurants. 35% had total coliform hits, and 17% had E. coli, which is really quite bad. We want that to be 0. So it was an issue, but it did help us create a MOU with Bureau of Environmental Health and BCQ for in the future. There's a path to respond quicker to something like this. Recommendations, obviously coordination amongst the agencies is super important. Communications was the biggest gap I saw at times, and that was coming from an internal, like even CUC, like I feel like we could have been much better, you know, running power to the right wells first and foremost, rather than residential areas or whatever, just to get that recovered. Because we were trying to coordinate with FEMA, with the Army Corps of Engineers, or where to put generators. And so you want the communication channels to be open from the top down and the bottom up so that everybody knows what's going on and where to prioritize next. And then, yeah, the MOU that they started is a good thing for the future too. So, yeah, John told me to make it quick, so thank you.
All right, thank you, Travis. Okay, now we're going to shift into the discussion, kind of talk show format, and we have a really distinguished panel. So I'd like to introduce this panel. So to my right is Bob Fenton. Bob is the FEMA Regional Administrator for Region 9. He was FEMA's acting administrator nationally during the first 6 months of the Trump administration. And he's been a regional administrator since 2015, which means under both the current and the past administration. Bob had a leadership role in the development of the National Incident Management System and the National Response Framework. Those are big deals. And he's responded to more than 50 emergencies, including Hurricane Katrina, Typhoon Punxsutawney in Guam, California wildfires, and the 9/11 World Trade Center terrorist attacks. Plus, he's done response work in Africa. Further to my right is Mike Stoker. Mike is the EPA Regional Administrator for EPA Region 9, and he's my boss too. And
I thought you were my boss.
yeah.
In the Pacific Islands, I always have to do whatever John tells me.
I just let you believe that. Yeah. Since becoming regional administrator just barely a year ago in May of 2018, Mike has overseen several emergency responses for EPA, including in Hawaii, California wildfires, and Typhoon Yutu. And he's made it clear that the Pacific Islands are one of his top priorities. Before he received his appointment from the president, Mike worked as an attorney, specializing in agriculture, labor, land use, and environmental law. He was an elected official on Santa Barbara County's Board of Supervisors and active in California policy and regulatory issues, serving as California Deputy Secretary of State on the Labor Relations Board, and he was Director of Government Affairs for one of the largest ag associations in California. On my left is CNMI Lieutenant Governor Arnold I. Palacios. Arnold was elected CNMI Lieutenant Governor in November 2018 on the same ticket as Governor Ralph de Leon Guerrero Torres. Prior to serving as Lieutenant Governor, Arnold was the Senate President of the 20th Northern Marianas Commonwealth Legislature. He was also Speaker of the House, former CNMI Secretary of Lands and Natural Resources. He has authored legislation in both the House and the Senate focused on advancing the economy and welfare of the CNMI. And importantly for this topic, Arnold authorized the legislation which established the Office of Planning and Development in the CNMI. So let's welcome our panelists. So I'd like to start, Bob, with you. So we'll just kick it off with you. So maybe if you can just elaborate a little bit on the difference or distinction between response and recovery?
Sure. So response for us is immediately following the disaster. What we focus on is really stabilization of life, protecting life, restoring critical infrastructure to really get things going back again, to ensure security, those kind of things. And then recovery is rebuilding the infrastructure that was damaged, and it can go on for some time, all the way into long-term recovery. So at FEMA, we look at response and recovery and management of disasters is one thing, and then the other side of the house is resiliency in everything we do, really prior to disasters, or left to boom, as you would say, in preparing or hardening or mitigating against future disasters. So my motto is the battles are fought in response and recovery, but the wars are won in resiliency. And so if you're really going to affect or change outcomes of these disasters, we got to do it before these disasters strike. So thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, from a CNMI perspective and thinking about recovery, how is preparing for the next UTU, including rebuilding what was damaged, different for the CNMI than for the rest of the country? So how is preparing for disaster? How is preparing for disaster, including rebuilding what you need to rebuild after UTU, how is that different in the CNMI, or is it different than the rest of the United States?
Well, I grew up in Saipan, and there were a period of time where typhoons was an annual occurrence. It's going to happen. And so we knew how to prepare. But in the past 20, 25 years, we've had a big storm. So we've I believe we've kind of just forgot how to prepare for major storms. And we were building homes that probably wouldn't stand up to more than 125-mile winds. As you could well see, there was a lot of corrugated tin houses and wooden houses that just got completely annihilated. When I believe in the late 60s, one of the major typhoons that hit Saipan was Super Typhoon Jean. The rebuilding effort also had a resiliency component to that, and that is that any HUD or housing project that was going to go up had to be concrete. So for the longest time, houses were fairly safe. And then we had Super Typhoon Jean, and we were pretty safe. But from then on to Sudalor, we didn't think we were ever going to get another typhoon. 3 years later, we got the biggest typhoon in people's life, in my whole generation, and even some of the older generations. So, is it different? To some extent, it is. A lot of us know how to get through typhoons. It is a major awakening to the people of the Commonwealth that these events will happen. It's just a matter of when. So I believe now that 25 years or more finally hit us, we are fully reminded that these events will happen. These events, and we're right in Typhoon Alley. It will will happen in Saipan and the Marianas Chain could be next month. We just never know. So preparing for these things is going to be very, very different. I think people will remember Sudalore and Yutu for generations, and hope that with local governments and federal agencies and partners, we can begin to take a look at what it is that needs to be done to really build appropriate and resilient infrastructure, homes, and even how to prepare properly. We used to have people that know that before a storm, you have drinking waters reserved. In the last 2 or 3 typhoons, we just weren't really prepared. That's why, like Travis said, water was one of the premium thing that we needed. And Bob was talking about, recovery, and now how to build resiliency. I believe a lot of agencies, especially federal agencies and the local government, have begun that process and appropriate planning, not just for basic infrastructure like water and power, but I think even to the homes and the schools we build. I mean, our kids are still in tents. And can I also say other things? Last night we had a presentation of sort, and one of the presenters showed this video, which I really never saw, and it really hit home, really hit home. So I thought I'd bring in this video was done by Robert Hunter. I think some of you folks know who he is. But what I also want to say and bring to the table, if I may, is to extend the people of the Commonwealth's gratitude to every agencies, federal government, FEMA, Department of Defense, Admiral there. Saipan was her second home. She was in and out, twice, 3 times a week. They came to our rescue. And so many government agencies, so many non-government agencies, so many aid-based organizations came to our rescue. And we wouldn't be this far along in our recovery had it not been for governments, the government of Guam, Guam Power Authority, FSM government, and other regional governments. So I think that it is only appropriate that we acknowledge that, and we have governmentors and grateful community. Thank you for all the help that you have extended to us. This is a very timely conference, I believe. In fact, as we speak, Bill Roach of FEMA is up there with the governor talking to CUC and other of our government agencies. They're talking about how to harden those wells. And for whatever reason, resources were available after Sudalore. to begin hardening the wells, particularly in the southern part of Saipan, and it just took us quite a while to get going, and lo and behold, another huge storm hit us. So time is now to get going on these things. There's just no more time for delay. We need to commit ourselves as a government, as a people in this community to get this done.
Thank you. Mike, in your first year in office, EPA Region 9 did emergency responses at several disasters. But after YUTU, you also wanted to focus more on recovery together with FEMA and the CNY government. So the question is, given that recovery is a fairly new thing at EPA, what led you to see YUTU as an opportunity for recovery and resilience?
Well, I went to Saipan twice in less than 60 days, and I was told some of my predecessors never made it their entire tenure. And the reason is, as a former county supervisor, I was in an emergency operations center 5 times as a county supervisor with floods and fires. And you know, when I was first sworn in, it would have been May 21st, 2018. And my staff said, okay, next week, here's your schedule. And I said, no, that's not my schedule. I said, my schedule is I'm off to Hawaii. And they go, well, why are you going to Hawaii? And I said, because we have a national disaster with the volcano. And when you have a national disaster, that becomes your priority. And Bob and Bill, who a lot of you in Saipan got to know Bill Roach, who's a guy that was there from the very beginning and didn't go home until the end of the response, and met his wife like literally 3 times in Honolulu as a halfway point. That's the kind of dedication. And you know, I brought my experience as a county supervisor. I went to Saipan early December. The primary reason then was to make sure my folks had everything they needed to start working with Bill Roach and FEMA. And from my perspective, and I think one of the things I've been told by our emergency responders in Region 9, and I think you're going to hear this word more and more, as a county supervisor, you focus on resiliency. And you know, I just took really the micro model I had at a smaller level for a county and applied it on a much larger level, knowing, and Bob hit the nail on the head. I mean, to me, recovery is synonymous with resiliency. And when I met with John there, that became my mission, which I went back within 60 days, as I said. And the second time around, the first time was, and I remember meeting Bob with my then fiance, who I was married on Sunday, my now wife Debbie, was driving me as Bob was leaving Chico, where he was up for the California fire, and I was driving up to Chico for the California fire, and dropped off with him a letter which I had promised Bill that I would give to Bob to talk about all the ideas that we thought from what we saw with going from response to going into the next level, of which I had instructed John, I wanted our whole focus to be resiliency. And you know, you have to keep in mind, a lot of people, you know, I got to toot the horn for EPA. FEMA is incredible, but it's usually EPA that's the second most federal agency that's involved in a national disaster. You know, we're the agency that is picking up all the household hazardous waste. And we're the agency that's picking up all the transponders that have come down, which we got 1,800 of in Saipan. We're the agencies that are dealing with the discharge of polluted discharges in the bays and in the rivers that happen as a result of these natural disasters. So the best way to avoid that is the resiliency as you go forward. So the next time around, when you're talking about you knew that a home wouldn't stand up to 125 mile an hour winds, you know, I look at resiliency that, you know, you once had wooden power poles that go down a whole lot easier than concrete power poles, but underground electricity even doesn't go down at all. So that's resiliency. And one of the things that I put a major focus in for my second time to Saipan, and meeting with several of their legislators, and I commend what the government has done, was underscoring the need to do things like adopt 2018 International Building Codes, to do things to make sure you have building inspectors that know what they're inspecting when they go out, so that that building code is really what's being built is being built to code. And that is how I look at resiliency, because every time one of those homes stands up through that storm, that's one less house that EPA is going to be dealing with household hazardous materials. So, you know, what I took out of the whole thing and the whole focus, and I think the partnership Region 9 has with FEMA, I mean, this man is an incredible guy. I mean, he could write the book, you heard the resume. I'm kind of the new kid on the block, and my emergency responders know how much emergency response means to me, and how I immediately make that my top priority, and I'm in the field to be there with them, to get them what they need. But at the end of the day, one of the things that you're now seeing nationally, the whole word resiliency is going to be a word going forward that as you come out of these natural disasters, the focus, and you can see that even with the congressional action that was recently passed with legislation, is to focus in on resiliency, because I guarantee the more resilient you are, the less the negative impacts will be the next time around.
All right, thanks. And to Bob, there have been a lot of disasters nationally in the recent past. What adjustments has FEMA made to its approach in light of those recent disasters?
So, great question, and it's been an unbelievable 2 years as far as disasters go. In fact, FEMA's been around for 40 years, and we have provided more funding in the last 2 years than the previous 38, just to give you an idea of how busy we are. I put down some stats here just to give you, in 2017-18, 50 million people were affected in the United States by disasters, 5 million households destroyed or damaged, $100 billion in insured losses, to give you an idea of how bad 17-18 was across the United States. So when we talk about, you know, the need to better build resiliency, the need to better prepare, it's an issue that's across the United States. One of the jobs FEMA has is mapping floodplains. We map those. People know who lives in floodplains. They buy flood insurance that's discounted by FEMA. Less than a third of the people that live in high hazard areas actually have flood insurance. So we really need to change the mindset across the whole United States, states and territories, to better prepare and make more resilient. And I think that you know, we're doing a lot of those things right now in Region 9, whether it's, you know, how to better prepare for the wildfires in California, or the impacts that happen to Yutu and hardening infrastructure. We're doing things such as partnering with CNMI to better improve the resiliency of the power infrastructure, to really look at critical lifelines and figure out how to ensure that there's redundancy in those systems. And in many cases, we're partnering with them on not only us, but other federal agencies on how to pull together grants to ensure that there's water after disasters. So we are not only changing the mindset with our vernacular across the United States, but there's been recent legislation that's been enacted by Congress that's actually taking, typically in the past what's happened is after every disaster, we pull together about 15% of the funds that we spend on the disaster, and we provide it to a state or territory to then mitigate against those effects in future disasters. What Congress has done now is they've taken 6.5% that we spend on total disasters every year, and they gave it to us for pre-disaster mitigation. So, let's go ahead and if we know that there's critical areas or critical gaps, let's go ahead and address those gaps up front in hardening infrastructure or making it more resilient. So we're not only putting money behind that, but we're doing things such as public education and outreach programs. We work with 300 universities across the United States on emergency management and building resiliency. And so I think more than ever, our programs are now geared toward really focusing on how do we, as we help people recover, ensure that they're more resilient to ensure that we don't have impacts from those disasters and other events. I think a good example is if you look at Guam. I've been coming to Guam. Actually, it's kind of interesting. You say your first time. I got off the airplane and checked into Hertz. They said, have you been here before? I go, yeah, I've been here a couple of times. And she looked at the thing. She's like, oh, 23 times. And I'm like, well, in my head, I'm thinking, well, usually I choose national, but but I have been here. I probably spent a year of my life between Guam, CNMI, and Micronesia. I probably spent a year of my life out here responding to disasters going all the way back to PACA. And when you look at the damage and destruction from PACA to Chitahan to Pangsanwa, what Guam has done with their infrastructure, you look at the power infrastructure, you look at the codes they've adopted for residential structures, you look at their ports, you look at all those kind of things. They've done an amazing job of hardening this island. And I think it's a great example. So we're learning from that. We're taking those lessons learned from not only Guam, but from other islands, and going ahead and working with CNMI. And the good thing with CNMI is they have excellent leadership with the governor and lieutenant governor, and working with them to go ahead and bring the myriad of federal agencies together to help them make the island more resilient. We flew over 200 huge cargo planes in there, everything from handoffs to the military planes. And we don't want to have to do that again if we could go ahead and build the infrastructure to be operational right after the event. So that's the goal.
Well, first off, this is my third time to Guam in less than a year. On that point, water, I don't know, is water in here? Back to that point, as I said, the second time over to Saipan, John and I, our main focus was resiliency. I was on the phone with Walter, with Travis, and on getting the building codes from here in Guam, so we could get them with the legislators that I'd been meeting with over in Saipan. And I coordinated with Walter, and we got a lot of those building codes going. Look at least if you go to back to resiliency, if you go to that next level, Guam has done things that you haven't done that you can do, and they face the same possibilities of the same calamities from typhoons as you do. And that literally, back to that trip, John remembers, I met with Walter in the airport, that we were coordinating with Travis that was getting that information that we were getting back to the legislators over in Saipan that ultimately led to legislation that will lead to a more resilient Mariana Island CNMI.
And for folks who don't know, that was Walter Leon Guerrero, the Guam EPA administrator. Lieutenant Governor, when you were Senate President, you drafted and introduced the bill that created the Office of Planning and Development. And in hindsight, you had that was an excellent idea and excellent timing, because they were in place only less than a year before Yutu hit, and they seemed poised to take the lead on recovery activities. I wonder if you could just describe for people the Office of Planning and Development and what role it will play in recovery.
Well, because of this major event, I think a lot of the initial thoughts that went into that legislation, which became law, has really changed in terms of the timeline that we need to get going on planning. But if one looks at the governance in the Commonwealth for a long time, maybe 10, 20 years, we really we forgot to plan. You have agencies that were doing their own functions of land use plan or coastal plans and wetland plans and all kinds of plans. And nobody was talking to each other, really. And so at the end of the day, when major events happen, we all just threw up our hands to what happened. Nothing happened. So that was initially, and well-planned communities, which a lot of us have seen. You go in there to a community that's had really good city planning, urban planning, rural planning, and you tend to appreciate everything. You're an outsider and you see it. And so, for island communities, my thoughts was, for my island particularly, when you have buildings going up there, you know, a $250,000 building going up there, maybe $1 million building going up there, and then you have a shack right next to it, something's wrong. When you have infrastructures that are available on this side of the island and are not on the other side of the island, something's wrong. And so everybody had their plans, every agency had their own different plans, and the office was supposed to consolidate everything into a comprehensive approach. When Super Typhoon Yutu hit, it accelerated our thoughts to get going on this hazard mitigation, resiliencies, infrastructure development plans. And this is an opportunity, really, despite the fact that it took a major disastrous, catastrophic event. It woke us up and said, hey, this is an opportunity. The opportunity is the U.S. Congress, our federal partners are there to help us. Let's get this done right. And so this office is going to be playing a major role. I know that the office began to coordinate and have serious discussions and getting assistance from the many different agencies in federal government. So that's where we're at today.
Thanks. So Mike, EPA has partnered with FEMA and the CNMI government, in particular the Office of Planning and Development, on the Smart Safe Growth Project, which includes the Smart Safe Growth Guidance Manual, which has become essentially CNMI's blueprint for recovery. And some of the manual goes beyond what would be EPA's normal area, like drinking water, stormwater, solid waste, and gets into other long-term sustainability and resilience areas. Is this something, it seems like such a good thing, and it hits such foundational areas like building codes, like you mentioned. Is this something that we can replicate elsewhere, for example, in other Pacific islands in terms of planning for resilience going forward?
Yeah, and I got to correct the record. Some of the people that I think are the most awesome people are the public health officers, and I was giving Travis credit for Brian, because Brian's my guy on Guam, and Travis is my guy on Saipan, and it was Brian who was getting those building codes that was going to Walter. So, sorry, Brian, because you two are like right in line there, two PHOs there. Look, yeah, no, I think, I think just as, again, I guess I'm the new kid on the block, at least as far as federal disasters are concerned. I've seen a huge difference in 1 year in regards to the conversations you and I were having first in December with Bill and representatives of the CNMI government and us going back, and that's where you and I started talking about smart growth, and Juliet, who's incredible in your office, and we started coordinating with her, and I think that's what created a dialogue that, you know, had not come out of other disasters. And I mean, if there's one good thing I've learned, and again, Bob would be the best expert, I know as far as FEMA is concerned, and EPA is concerned, and the Coast Guard strike teams are concerned, and the Department of Defense, I think what I've seen is doing a phenomenal job kind of in debriefing on how do we do things better, whether it's getting you know, you mentioned the second time around you had a whole lot more generators that weren't there the first time that were pre-positioned. I think, you know, I got to brag for my folks that I know Bob will join in. On the California wildfires, FEMA and EPA, I gave a report to Administrator Wheeler in the first week of December, last December. We opened up our Incident Command Center on December 8th, and I was giving him a report based on everything that we expected from past history, FEMA and EPA, that our mission assignment from FEMA to clean up the household hazardous materials was going to be an 8 to 9 month mission assignment. Our folks finished that in 2.5 months. You know, I get pretty emotional when I talk about that, because, I mean, they hit it out of the park and did an incredible job. And they do what all these folks do, the strike teams, Department of Defense, FEMA, EPA, their focus on dealing with that disaster, first responding, first recovering. And what I've seen happen that I think is really, maybe it's evolving from Region 9, but it's spreading nationally, is this whole concept of smart growth. And that's now a new page in the playbook that is part of, I guess, that debriefing indirectly that's taken place, that definitely is not only applicable in my mind in, you know, the Pacific Islands. It's applicable. I have 148 tribes in Region 9. You know, there's a lot of smart growth that could go on in those tribes, in those tribal lands. And so I think that's one of the real good things that came out of Super Typhoon Yutu, is the huge focus on things like smart growth and resiliency that are going to significantly minimize damage in future disasters.
All right, and I'm going to want to move to audience participation pretty soon, but question for both Bob and Lieutenant Governor. Mike mentioned building codes. How important are building codes to the resiliency and recovery?
Of all the time to ask that question, right? And you had to ask me, right?
Yes.
I mean, 6 months, 8 months after a super typhoon basically annihilated the southern part of the Saipan and the whole team. Building codes are critical. They are very critical. As a politician, that was probably one of the harder legislation to get passed and become law. I'm being honest. You'd be surprised how much pushback. And people just, members of Congress just delay it, kick it down the road, because the next campaign season is upon us. But you two, even Sudalore, reminded us that this is not something we can continue to kick down the road and expect our federal partners like the Department of Defense, FEMA, EPA, to on a 6 months or an annual basis come out there and, like Bob said, bring in 200 planes to rescue us. For lack of better words, our own stability. But those are the real world sometimes that any person in elected office faces, is a pushback for political experience. But I say this in honesty that as I drove down those streets in those villages, you know, I told my friend that was with me, I didn't freaking know that there was this many corrugated tins on cycle. I'm serious. And there are roads that you couldn't even pass by because of all the lumbers and the tins, and had to be cleared. And I give credit to the Guam National Guard and the reserves and the military and FEMA folks and the mayor of Saipan and everybody that helped. We were in shock. We were just in shock. People were walking the streets the next day, just didn't know. So you're asking me about building codes? Yeah, John. Building codes it is. In fact, the last time he was there, he shared this thing with me, and he said, you know, the code that has been adopted is outdated. We need to get up to the 2018 specs. So I immediately, in fact, you were right there. I called up Senator Somar to ask him to get that changed. So it's in the hopper.
So I would just say that, you know, as I look across the country, I've been to all different parts, you know, of the country, from, you know, way out here at CNMI, through California, through the Midwest, all over the East Coast. I think building codes are some of the most difficult decisions for local governments and states to make. You know, we every year establish, you know, international building codes for different types of construction as guidance, and then it's up to local governments and states to adopt it. And sometimes it's very difficult fiscal decisions to make on what to build to. We see that in California with wildland-urban interface. You see it out here, especially, you know, a lot of this conference talked about climate change and what the effects of that will be. And so, you know, what do you build to, and what is the impact of that? It's really a risk-based decision to make. So again, at the beginning, I talked about, one of the things I talked about is, in order to really get to resiliency and long-term recovery, it takes tremendous leadership. And I think that's what you're seeing happen in CNMI right now, with them adopting the 2018 IBC Codes for Residential Structures, is putting, you know, life, their community first, and making sure that structures are built safe to survive the storms we're not only seeing today, but the storms that we'll probably see into the future. So those are tough decisions to make, very tough decisions to make, and I see that all over the country. And not everyone, you know, it takes some people, you know, aren't able to adopt those. We still see people build in floodplains and high flood hazard risk areas all over the United States. And so the more that we're able to understand your risks locally, and that's what smart growth helps, so understand those risks and build to the codes in order to ensure that you're safe against those risks, how critical that is in being able to be more resilient.
Okay, one last question before we turn and go to the audience. I'm going to ask you all the same question. I'm looking for a very short answer, like 30 seconds or less. What would you say is the single most important thing we ought to be considering for resiliency moving forward?
I think we're all the same.
Single most important thing, wow. You know, I think it's, to me, it's the infrastructure, you know, critical lifelines and infrastructure, things like power, water, the things that we're dependent on that enable us, quite frankly, to live. So to me, it's ensuring those things with power. Everything else seems to come, and so I'd focus my resiliency on those areas.
Well, I used to be a politician, and I would have taken a couple minutes, but I'm not a politician anymore. Smart growth.
From the experience that we have in small islands community, I think the basic infrastructure would be the most critical, and that is water, power, and sanitation. Travis mentioned this. It is, I stood there ready to, I don't say that, ready to strangle the CUC director because I wanted water. My people wanted that water flowing and I was exceptionally pissed off when I went up to the airport with an Antonov sitting on the tarmac with 50 generators just sitting there. I said, what the hell? The wells are less than 2 miles down the road. Let's get them down. But yeah, we really hope that we would that would be done. And there's my 30 seconds.
I think you should let Travis answer that one as well.
Well, from my perspective, yeah, getting generators on your key wells for Saipan, anyways. Tinian would have been easy. If they had one generator, they could have water up the next day. It was as simple as that. A lifeline like water. And CUC's got 3-4 sites that have generators, buildings there that just weren't working. It's just kind of ignorance. Truly, it's just sad that it wasn't able to just turn them on.
Okay, the next part's going to be a little bit tricky logistically, only because we have this one microphone. So we'll have to run around a little bit. And we also have some other distinguished guests. So I'm looking to this table first. Senator Will Castro from Guam and Admiral Chatfield. I don't know if either one of you would want to say anything.
I just want to acknowledge also Senator Jude Hofschneider from Tinian's here, so thank you for joining us. Thank you, Bob, and everybody else who's spoken earlier. I just wanted to add another piece to this equation. The Lieutenant Governor is familiar with some of these initiatives, so is Senator Hofschneider. Going forward in terms of addressing resiliency, I think one of the keys could be stronger regional partnerships. I know in the Marianas Working Group, we've begun to articulate some of these agreements on one or more points. And if the slide was up, it'll show you some of the agreements, at least the political will is expressed in the areas of food security. As UTU itself is a fine lesson, you can see that not all of the archipelago or the Marianas was hit at the same time or with the same intensity. And so, I would suspect that if we can articulate what those bilateral agreements would be, let's say, crop rotation or certain types of tax, tariff-free, or whatever type of policy framework we could set up to encourage growth between Guam and CMI farmers or fishers or ranchers. That's something I would encourage our federal partners to come to the table with as well. Also, probably not related as directly to infrastructure, Bob and others, would be policing, mutual aid outside of just the utilities and infrastructure, things like emergency response and recovery, with emergency personnel, law enforcement personnel, and this is post-disaster recovery and response, right? So those are the last two things. Actually, I have one more. It comes from a conversation also with a Region 9 official, I think it's Health Human Services, and early on there was a discussion about 2 years back, and I would love for you to pick up this conversation, given the new network you have and the long-standing relationships in this part of the world, would be perhaps a pharmaceutical distribution center. So the concept some time ago was, perhaps we build a warehouse that was a medicine or pharmaceutical distribution center for just-in-time inventory, not just for Guam and the CNMI, but that would service the rest of South PAC, the South Pacific, and our allies, key allies of the United States. And so that may be able to serve as a point of distribution in the future if our federal government can help us. And I am, sorry, I'm a politician. This is my last point, and I'll give it to the Admiral. One example, also one lesson we may be able to learn from would be in the case of the destruction of the Northern Marianas College. And Fran Castro and a bunch of other officials here from the CNMI, could probably correct me, but a great percentage of that campus was annihilated. It was destroyed. The roofs were gone. They couldn't function as a campus. And so forward thinking in terms of long-term sustainability for current operations, perhaps an agreement that would put their students in the last leg of their second year at the college over at the University of Guam or GCC at no real cost to the local governments if our federal partners can come to the table. And so I just wanted to thank you for making Guam and the CNMI your home away from home, and thank you and welcome to the family, the FEMA administrator, and also welcome back, John, welcome home. And I'm sure we'd like to have one of those types of shirts from American Samoa as well, so thank you so much for your time. I've exhausted my 30 seconds.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you for everyone for being here. It was a distinct honor to lead the military DoD presence in Saipan and Tinian, and to see so many well-meaning soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marine, Coast Guardsmen, and Guardsmen come to help on really days of notice. You raised some really good points, and there are so many more people who I would elevate in their participation, including the Coast Guard and the FAA, who were able to inspect and open the ports and the airports rapidly, because the response depends on logistics. And at the moment of crisis, everything becomes a first priority. Stepping back and being deliberate about what actually gets prioritized. So food and water are of the utmost importance, as were the generators, as were the trucks to distribute them. But to have that first 15 days of plan laid out so that whatever air can get in can be loaded without delay. And changing priorities in the first days actually delays product from getting on the plane. And sometimes product gets on the plane, then taken off the plane, and then something else to go on in its place. And each one of those movements means that a flight will not go that day. And so I think having these experts in logistics is one of the absolute imperatives in the first 15 days, so that the right things get in at the right time and can be distributed, and that whatever limited resources in air and then sea lift can be prioritized to the right location without any waste in that supply chain. And I just once again want to say what an honor it was to serve the population of the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands.
All right, thanks. Senator Hofschneider, you want to say anything?
Thank you, John, and the rest of the distinguished members of the panel, of course, to the people. But before I say my remarks or pointers, I do also want to recognize the presence of the current mayor of Tinian, Mayor Audon, is here in the crowd. He had a real-time experience on the island of Tinian during the height of Typhoon Yutu, as well as some of the key employees that were involved pre, during, and post. Chief of Staff Alan Perez, and the gentleman to my right is Director of Public Works. So maybe before I say anything, I want to ask if the mayor wants to just share a little bit.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I wanted to thank the agencies and the military. Admiral Chatfield will miss you, and we thank you on behalf of the people of Tinian. We thank you for partnering up and being there, and being ready when things come about in our Commonwealth. To the people from FEMA, Mr. Stokes, EPA, you guys did an awesome job when we needed you guys, and you showed up, you helped us. A lot of people thought that recovery would take a year. I would honestly say that with the support and with the collaboration and working together with the federal agencies, we're at 80% power water with built-in resiliency from wooden structure poles to we're almost, the entire island is almost concrete. You know, it's something that as politicians and policymakers would never dream that a storm would put us back to our right direction in rebuilding and solidifying our infrastructure. And just wanted to say it's an adventure, something that none of us politicians have ever tried going through. And we hope to our Lord that we never go through that again. To the partners from Guam, Senator, thank you, for delivering those goodies down to Tian on behalf of the people of Guam, and to all the NGOs that made contributions to the recovery and the relief, really from the bottom of our hearts. Zeus Masi, and thank you for being there. Yes.
Anybody have any other questions, comments?
No.
I just want to say, you've heard Admiral Chatfield, thank a lot of those folks. They probably don't need, I've been known to not need mics. If you were in Tenian, you also want to thank the Seabees out of Port Hueneme from Navy Base Ventura, that 370 homes that lost their roofs. They put what FEMA would define as a temporary roof, but those roofs look pretty, they look like roofs that could be around a while, but they were deployed, set up their camp, were there for 2.5 months, and did an incredible job. I'll be visiting them in 3 weeks to personally thank them for the job well done.
Any other questions? If there aren't any other questions, I do have one final question for the panel. But anyone else right now? Good job.
I didn't know that I forfeited my time, but just to be in order, I hear resiliency, hardening, preparedness, and just be ready for the next big one. Mother Nature is tricky sometimes, and the federal partners, Mr. Fenton, Mr. Stokes, and all the partners that have, and of course, Admiral Chatfield and Maniluta, in Wuhan, as one of the mayor was saying earlier, couldn't do it without you. The turnaround, the governor, lieutenant governor, of course, and his cabinets, the turnaround to recover was outstanding. The only thing that I probably is just a comment is we just need to be prepared. And I know that the training is ongoing. We recognize the challenges of the rebuilding aspect, as the workforce is a challenge as well. But with this kind of cooperation we have over there, I am very confident that we can be able to overcome. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm David Eisenberg, Development Center for Appropriate Technology in Tucson, Arizona. I've been involved for 20-some years in trying to help the building code community recognize environmental impacts of buildings And climate change is a gigantic one. And so it's not just making sure that our building codes are looking forward and responding to the changes that a changing climate present, but also looking at how to minimize the climate impact of the built environment and other environmental impacts. And one of the things I would love to see is EPA and some other federal agencies more directly involved in the code development process to address some of those issues. Because the codes are focused on a set of really important things, but they're basically ignoring a whole set of other impacts and hazards that are being created, but that they see as in a different silo. And the reality is there's not someone or some agency that really understands that they have the authority and responsibility to be dealing with those other hazards. And so the code people basically say, that's not our department. But in fact, they're driving a bunch of impacts that are crucial and that are not addressed. And I spent 24 years on trying to get sustainability concepts into building codes. And I would love to see more help from the federal government working with the codes community to address some of those issues. So, and I thank you. I mean, all the stuff that's been talked about here is really important. I'm a big supporter of up-to-date codes and all of that, because life safety is crucial, but there's a larger perspective that also needs to be embedded in what we're doing. Thanks.
Actually, I think we're about at time right now. I'm gonna end it with one question. Hopefully this is a one-word response to our panel members. Are you optimistic or pessimistic that based on what we're doing, based on the resiliency and recovery efforts going on now, that if another U2 hit, say 5 years from now, 5 or more, let's go 5 or more years from now, that optimistic that we meaning the CNMI will be in more resilient and suffer less damage? Optimistic or pessimistic?
Very, very optimistic. You know, there's no such thing as optimism. We're going to do it. We have to do it. We don't have a choice.
Definitely optimistic. I have 7 years till I retire, so if it's 5 years.
There's no question. Very optimistic. It's happening. I mean, it's happening. You heard it here today, so.
Okay, well with that, I want to thank our audience and I want to thank our panel members, Mike Stoker, Bob Fenton, Lieutenant Governor Arnold Palacios, and Travis Spaeth. And in particular, Arnold was tough to get a plane from the CNMI, and Bob had a very long plane ride from San Francisco. So let's thank our panel. Mike Stoker also had a very long. You're on honeymoon, man. You're on honeymoon. Thank you all very much.
So with that, we're going to start first with Andrew, who's coming to us from Skype. And Andrew, I think everybody heard him speak earlier this morning about food waste, excuse me. I'm getting a little tongue-tied. Let me get my bio. And Andrew, I might just go ahead and, hold on, I found it, thank you. So Andrew is a food waste prevention advocate and founder CEO of Lean Path. He's been doing this for 15 years. He really, I love it. It says he's evangelized the importance of eliminating food waste while engaging global food organizations. This morning when Timothy introduced him, you heard of the companies he works with and sort of the partnership aspect that was highlighted. You'll hear in terms of Sodexo and other corporations, IKEA, Google. And for the past couple of years, they've been really working so much to prevent 37 million pounds of food waste from being taken to the landfills. So with that, Andrew, we're going to turn it over to you, and I think our IT techs are telling us that he's ready to go. So I think we'll start with Andrew. Go ahead.
Great. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, we can hear you good. Everybody, round of applause for hearing Andrew. Yes.
I'm happy to be here in a little bit clearer way than I was earlier. So I think for those of you who were attending earlier, you heard me talk a fair amount about food waste and the problem. And I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about solutions. And I think when we talk about green marketing, we're really talking about how do we tell success stories, because we know that when we have successes privately and no one knows about them, it doesn't have the sort of social diffusion impacts that we want to have. So it's really critical that when we have successes, we talk about them and we share them. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that in the world of food waste. And specifically, I'm going to talk about the importance of data in this process, because when you're sharing your successes, it's really critical that these are authentic and that they are based in very credible sort of facts, because we know there's been a lot of greenwashing that has existed, and I think that we have very sophisticated antenna at this point as consumers and customers and stakeholders for when something's not real. And so it's really critical now that we are grounding everything when we talk about success stories in data. And so we heard a little bit about the importance of third-party labels and certifications and things like that. My take on this is going to be really almost a first-party, if you will, kind of validation, where talking about how organizations can work on food waste and tell their story and really validate it by bringing data to the table to substantiate the positive impacts that they're having. So I talked earlier today about food waste. I'm not going to recover that, although I have a couple slides here just to set the context for the conversation. We know this is a huge problem, which also makes it a really interesting topic to talk to people about from a marketing point of view. It's emotional. It gets people's attention. We talked earlier today about how it's a nexus issue that touches on not just food waste as a single concept, but many things, from energy to climate to hunger to soil health, et cetera. So it's something that really hooks people when you talk about it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do that. You heard a little bit earlier today about the kind of perspective we have, so I won't spend time on our vision other than we're focusing on helping people reduce food waste and minimize it, prevent it, and that's really the purpose of all of this sort of work. So I left off earlier with the concept that people needed to focus more on preventing food waste, and now we're going to talk a little bit about how we do that. So when we look at going about collecting data and to be able to substantiate success stories around food waste, we started by looking at other manufacturing environments. And we looked at kitchens and we said, these are really kind of like factories, except no one really thinks of them as factories. But what could we learn from the way that manufacturing is done? What could we learn from Lean and Six Sigma and concepts like that we might be able to bring into the kitchen to be able to start doing data-driven discovery and team-based problem solving, engaging broader groups, and then ultimately being able to make an impact and talk about it. So we borrowed some of these concepts from the factory space, and we brought it into kitchens, and we said, okay, let's start by implementing one simple change, which is daily measurement of all food waste. So when we first said this, people thought we were nuts, and maybe we were a little bit, but the truth is now it is daily practice in many, many locations. And the idea is before you throw away that lasagna that you made too much of, or before you throw away some trimmings from melons that you have, you simply weigh them. You put them on a scale, and we record the data about them in a very automated and quick and easy way. And then that leads to the ability to tell stories and roll that data up and understand what's happening, what's changing. So that's the context for this. And what we find is that when you start to focus on measurement, two things happen. The first is one that I think is very intuitive for many of us, and that's that when we get information, we learn things. And if we're paying attention, we do things differently. So we learn what's being wasted, we change our forecasting, we change what we're producing, what we're purchasing, we might even change what's on the menu in a food service operation because we see that there's a lot of waste happening. And sometimes we come up with really creative ideas. So we find that we have a whole lot of orange peels. Well, what can we do to take orange peels and do something interesting with them? And we've had customers turn them into really green cleaners. We've had them turn them into flavor supplements. You've got all kinds of interesting things that happen. But the other thing that's fascinating, which occurs which is often overlooked, is that behavior change occurs the moment that you ask someone to measure something. Even if you never look at the data and you never study it, just the very act of putting a measurement mechanism into place starts to cause people to think and work differently. And there's a great Buckminster Fuller quote that says, if you want to change the way a person thinks, don't bother. Instead, give them a tool through the use of which they will change the way they think and they work. And so it's really important to remember that when we're talking about collecting data, it's not just about the information, it's about what we are changing in the minds of the people who are involved in collecting it. And so what we find is as soon as people start to collect data, we start to see food waste go down because they're talking about it, they're thinking about it, they're coming up with ideas at pre-shift meetings to do things differently and better. And what you see is that you start to have this dotted line here, which shows the difference between where you started and where you are in the future, where you've had significant waste reduction. Now, the first thing I will share with you is when you want to do green marketing and tell stories, it's really hard to tell a story about something that's invisible. So prevention, which I think is one of the most important things we can be talking about when we talk about food waste, often is the toughest thing to describe because it's the absence of something, not the presence. And so the only way that we get to talk about this and claim these successes and get other people enlisted in doing this excellent work is when we actually record the data and share it. And so we tend to find there are two different kinds of waste that we measure. The first is kitchen waste, what we call pre-consumer waste. So that's overproduction, spoilage, expiration, and trimmings. And we would do that literally, as I mentioned earlier, by getting teams involved in measuring things that are going to be going in the garbage before they go in the garbage, saying what it is, why it's being thrown away, that sort of thing. Putting that information into a little bit of software, collecting data from a scale. And so it's easy, it's engaging, feeding back data. First storytelling moment, feeding back data to the actual colleagues and employees who are collecting this information. They're the creators of the information and the first users of it. And we recognize that they are indeed the global change makers. The people working at the front line in food service are the ones that are in the greatest position to fix the food waste problem. So we owe them the first look at this data, what the impact it's having on the environment, financially, et cetera. So that's the first bit of green marketing, is actually right to the people who are collecting the data. And what we find is when that happens, people engage, they pay attention, there's a natural antipathy towards waste, and people get going on it, they get excited. And one of the stories that I like to tell, and this goes back a ways for some of you who may be familiar with the story of garbage in the city of Seattle. Seattle for a long time has sent their garbage down to Oregon in a garbage train along the Columbia River Gorge. It's beautiful and it's sort of contrapuntal to see a garbage train in a beautiful place like this. And when we talk to food service teams, we say, who has the ability to pull a full rail car off that train? Is it you or me at home? Maybe not. But you and me at work in a big college or hospital or school or a grocery store, we have the ability to take full cars off that train. And so making this vivid and real and showing people how they can have an impact is absolutely critical. The second part of the equation is talking to guests. And this is, in fact, probably the toughest thing to do because, it's touchy to talk to your customers about their food waste, right? I mean, so this is the first beginning of green marketing. It's to actually be talking to your customers about what your values are and also be hoping that that will cause them to think and act differently. But it's got to be done very, very carefully. And so what we've started to do is actually put floor scales underneath dish returns. And as people scrape items into the bins, we have signage up in these food service operations, and in real time, we update the data. So literally, as people are scraping items into the bin, the signs are changing. And they're telling people things like, hey, so far, we've wasted, X amount of, pounds of food waste or X number of meals today. And we've used a bunch of behavioral science concepts to try to get people's attention and shape the way they're interacting with this idea. And so it's not about shaming anyone or anything like that, but it's more about raising consciousness that our actions actually have outcomes that are associated with them. And so when we initially started doing this, we did this by the dish return. We put the sign there. Then we later learned it needed to go at the front of the restaurant so that people thought about this before they took their. And this works really well in places like schools and colleges where people often prepay and they can take whatever they want. We just want to get them thinking differently. So those are examples of telling stories and marketing effectively to your employees, to your guests. And then, of course, this allows for sharing externally and engaging people more broadly and building partnerships. And so that's, I think, one of the most exciting things is once you have this information, what you can do with it. And so, you know, one of the first things that people are doing is talking about their aspirations. And, you know, we've got this wonderful Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, and people are in a position to actually come out publicly and say, we're going to go for cutting food waste in half. And that's a powerful statement to make. It gets people on the record. It starts to draw partners into your ecosystem to help you with that goal, particularly if you're a business and you're generating food waste. When you announce that, you're saying, hey, we want to make something happen here. The second thing that people are doing is then they're disclosing their performance. And so one of the first to do this was the big grocer in the UK and many parts of the world, Tesco. And they now publish their food waste data publicly every single year. And so that is, you know, I think really watching this come all the way from data as a central concept about sort of telling your story to literally sharing the data in service of how you're performing against meeting your own targets and your own aspirations. And so I think this is really exciting that, you know, hopefully we're going to see more and more people coming forward and putting their data out there to engage people around this topic, which, you know, right now there's few, there will be many more. We've seen IKEA do this, and, you know, they recognized that food was precious and that they wanted to make change in the restaurants in IKEA stores, and they also wanted to make change in the lives of the coworkers in IKEA, and they also wanted to influence the way their customers and were thinking about food waste. And so they launched a global campaign on food is precious. And they said, hey, first, we're going to take care of this in our operations. And then second, we're going to talk with you about this. And so if you happen to visit an IKEA at some point, you will find a lot of communication around food being precious and not wasting it. You'll find it in their catalogs. You'll find them talking about it in many, many contexts because it's really speaking to values and it's about enlisting people in this process. So I think that's another sort of example of, it's not in this case so much like Tesco where it's straight up data, although IKEA will share some of that. This is very much about kind of the emotional core of it and starting by getting their own house really, really into the best shape possible. And so, you know, IKEA is now talking about this a lot, and this is some of the examples of the kinds of things they're saying. And then another one is Sodexo, which I know is very involved in Guam in the schools. And Sodexo is a global company based in France. It's the world's 19th largest employer. And they said that they were going to go forward and cut their food waste in half by 2025. And that was part of their Better Tomorrow commitments. And they had communicated that a while ago. But they recognized that, you know, it's one thing to set a goal. It's another to be wanting to talk about it publicly. And it's another to organize a global initiative to deliver against it in thousands and thousands of places. And so in the middle of May, the CEO of Sodexo talked about how food waste was a scandal and it needed to be addressed and how they were going to go forward and they were going to start measuring food waste across their entire business, starting with 3,000 of their sites in the next year. And this was, I think, a fairly fundamental, game-changing moment with people taking the storytelling to, I think, an incredibly transparent and public level, setting an example, and raising, I think, the expectations across the entire food industry that food waste needs to be dealt with at scale in a big way. And so that's a pretty exciting example. Another great example is the work that another large food service company has done that we work with, Aramark, where they work in many, many universities and hospitals and have been one of the first to get public communication out about the importance of food waste and to talk about the role of circularity and their role in participating in creating circular systems, telling their stories very publicly. So, you know, what I would say is that food waste happens to be an opportunity. It's not garbage. It is, you know, when I look at the bin, I don't see garbage. I see a bunch of ideas. I see, you know, really an empirical representation of our inefficiency and all kinds of things we can do better with. And the way we start getting the people to work on that is to collect data about it, to make it highly visible, to share that information, to make it accessible and transparent. And by doing that, we really draw people to us. We diffuse new social norms, and we make a difference on something as critical as food waste. So that's the overview I wanted to go through with you in this session, and I'm looking forward to hearing the other panelists. So thank you.
Andrew, are you going to be able to stick around for questions at the end, or do you need to take questions now?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. I will be here.
Awesome, great. So we're going to move on to our next two speakers. Great. I want to make sure which order we are going in. So we are now going to be hearing from, let me get my bio, from Gail Suzuki Jones. She is an energy analyst in the Hawaii State Energy Office. She is the acting energy efficiency branch chief and the lead accredited professional with a specialty in operations and maintenance, and has worked for over 20 years with the Hawaii State Energy Office at the state's Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. So I just mentioned the acronym LEAD, and that was one of the symbols that I had on the labels. And so she is lead accredited professional. She's received her master's from University of Washington and her BA in environmental studies from UC Santa Cruz. She's an active member of the U.S. Green Building Council, Hawaii chapter, and the AIA Honolulu, with government, nonprofit, and private sector experience in the implementation of energy and resource-efficient design and construction practices. Gail has worked closely with business, community, government, and NGO entities to implement energy and resource-efficient green building and green business programs, projects, events, and measures. So she's going to talk about the work that they've been doing in Hawaii and with some of the partnership aspects as well. So let's please welcome up Gail.
Hafa Ade and aloha. Aloha. Woo-hoo. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I'm very grateful and excited to be here today. I'm going to be talking to you about the Hawaii Green Business Program, and I want to first thank Guam EPA, EPA Region 9, as well as the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association. I got to meet with them and their members on Tuesday at their monthly membership meeting, so that was really great. There's a lot of interested and excited people there, and I'll let Mary talk about what they're doing. I won't go into ruining her surprise. Let's see. This one? Try it again. This one? Okay. First of all, I'd like to recognize one person in this photo here. She is standing on the left. What is that? Sorry. Anyway, there's some extra sound going on. But Andrew, your presentation went very well. Thank you. Okay, so back to the picture. The left picture, second person from the left, some of you may recognize, especially two of you in the back of the room who are related to her. Marlon Aguilar. She is actually from Guam. She grew up here. Went to college at the University of Hawaii, after which time I met her while she was working at DOH. And I really want to recognize her because she was instrumental in getting this program going. She found out about the Bay Area Green Business Program while at a conference in San Francisco and asked them if she could take their checklist, localize it for Hawaii for the hotel and resort sector. And they said, sure, go ahead, it's open source. And we've been doing the same for entities that contact us, and we're really excited that folks are interested in the program. And then the slide on the right is a photo, somewhat recent photo of our governor and an award ceremony in his office that we do annually. The slide on the left shows our first 4 hotels that we started working with. It was the Hilton Hawaiian Village, the Sheraton Waikiki, the Maunalani Resort, and the Kahala Mandarin Hotel at the time. So we started off with 4. We now have, I think, over 50 hotels, over 100 businesses, over 30 events, and about 20 government entities that have been recognized in our program. So where I come from is the State Energy Office. So basically, people were talking about environmental and energy goals. Our state has some pretty aggressive energy goals. So 100% clean energy by 2045. So we have to work very hard and aggressively to get there. We have to look at renewable energy, definitely energy efficiency first, as well as clean transportation. And I wanted to show you where I work, because I feel it's very important to see sort of what the context is. In Honolulu, I work at the State Office Tower, and it's that building in the middle. We got Energy Star labeled as well as LEED certified. The slide on the right is 17 of us volunteering to do a waste audit as part of the ARC program to see, we were talking about measurements, being able to assess and use data to validate what you're doing. So this is actually looking at how your LEED, how your green building is performing after it gets certified. So we've been assessing the energy, water data from the past year, our waste through the waste audit, as well as the indoor air quality performance. We actually went around the building with DOH, Travis Suramoto, who I want to give a shout out to. He got the devices from DOH because they're very expensive and well calibrated to measure CO2 as well as VOC levels. Okay, our program. This is sort of like the what, who, why, where, how, when, kind of not in that order, but anyway, it's a program that we started off with the hotel sector because of the 24/7 high impact nature of that business, and then expanded to other sectors as the demand arose. So we actually are looking now at restaurants, food service, groceries, office, retail, venues, and green events. So we've really expanded from what we started with. And then the hotels, businesses, etc. receive free technical assistance. We don't charge for our program. There is no fees that are involved. And they oftentimes realize savings in energy, water, as well as waste reduction. And then they receive recognition and promotion at the governor's office once a year. So it's a big media event. That's where you would go for the checklist. And so if you were interested, you'd complete the checklist, participate in a site visit, so we'd verify all the checklist items, and agree to mentor at least another business. So this is the old-fashioned way of getting the word out, just like Dania did outside the door. Green marketing, and she got a bunch of you to come in the door that may have not otherwise come in the door. So thank you for being here. Anyway, that was effective. Anyway, back to the slides. The annual recognition ceremony this year is a little later than usual. It'll be in July or August, and those are our partners there. So we have the Department of Health, Board of Water Supply, the Lodging and Tourism Association, a group similar to Mary's, the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, and a program from the Surfrider Foundation called Ocean Friendly Restaurants that we've just started to partner with. And this is a longer list. So the whole public-private partnership deal, it really does work. And when I first got into government over 20 years ago from the private sector, people would say, oh, you got a partner, public-private, and I was like, what does that really mean? And so as I did my work and worked on some grants with the EPA, I see Timony Hood in the audience there, EPA Region 9, we did actually a materials exchange facility, sort of a study, assessment, and development. And so I learned a lot in that process of how to do that public-private partnership. So this is a list of some of the groups that we partnered with, from state to local, nonprofit, professional association, higher education, as well as other nonprofit groups. And then, of course, the federal government that's given us some nice support over the years for our programs. These are the real stars, I think, of what we've done. They're actual people that have implemented exciting projects within the Green Business Program, helped us expand into areas that we wouldn't otherwise have gotten into because of their experience, youthful exuberance, enthusiasm, and their technical skills with high-tech items that I'm not quite sure how to do myself, but they're very good at. Oops, the slide got a little messed up. But anyway, some of them have volunteered over the years, others have gotten course credit, and then for those who are lucky, we got to pay them part-time. They're international as well as mainland and Hawaii students from HPU and the UH Manoa. And some of them have gone on to some pretty good jobs there. And what's kind of covered under that, the series of photos, is really the whole nature of it really being a win-win scenario. Some of these students really hadn't worked after college, and their experience working with us gave them some track record, and I could write them a job referral, and many of them, I did that and they got their jobs, so I'm very excited and proud of them. And then other partners that we sort of met along the way, this is a group that we met when we were working on the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. So it was a huge conference that came to Hawaii, bringing 10,000 delegates from all over the world, and their focus was on the environment. And so what we wanted to do was make sure the businesses, especially the hotels that they were going to be staying in, were really up to speed with going green, because we knew these people would be asking a lot of questions. So these folks really became our ambassadors and have helped us throughout the years gain both contacts within other agencies as well as some funding opportunities. So we're very thankful to them. And then this slide, on the bottom right corner is a shot from the Lodging and Tourism Association Engineers Advisory Council. And this was an award ceremony at their office in preparation for the IUCN event. And as you can see, they received certificates. They look very happy, and they were really great to work with. Some of them we have worked with in the past, but others of them we hadn't, and they were new to us. But we really sort of gained certain experience, and you know, it's like really building trust. It takes a while. It doesn't always happen immediately. And so I think through this, we've been incrementally able to grow our program. And so the bullets on the left show the various sectors, and the bullets on the right are actually the checklist items, sections. I'm going to pass one of the hotel ones around this way, and then the other one this way. So you can kind of take a look at what type of items we're looking at when we're asking the hotels to complete the checklist. And then I wanted to give you a sense of who's participated. I'm not going to read every name, but they range from smaller, medium-sized, as well as large hotels and resorts. And there's a picture of a couple of them receiving the awards at the governor's office. And then from the neighbor islands, we have sort of a smaller group, but we've recently gotten funding from the HTA, Hawaii Tourism Authority, to help expand to the neighbor islands and to hire part-time paid interns to help us do that. So we're really looking forward to that. And then LEED, we had just talked about that. These are some of the resorts that have gotten LEED certified. So there are about seven of them so far. And I hear in Guam, some banks have gotten certified, and the Power Authority, right? Some offices, these are also ranging from large office towers in Honolulu, medium size, as well as a small base yard on Maui. And then restaurant and food service, I brought that checklist as well. Okay, that's this one, thank you. And so this is a smaller subset, but really, if you think about it, restaurants don't have a lot of free time and staff. Many of them are running on a very tight budget, and so I think it's much more challenging for them to be involved. We have, however, some grocery stores, Whole Foods markets that have been very much interested in participating, and so Mary's going to pass around. Yeah, you could start passing that around. This is an interactive map that one of our interns developed via ArcGIS, so you're able to find businesses through this particular part of our website. So this again is the process that I talked about. We also require the most recent 2 years energy, water, waste, and recycling data so that we're able to see if there has been change, if there have been reductions and or savings. And we got that as part of a grant from the EPA where we were required to submit metrics, and we just started to do it and decided to keep doing it. So it's become part of our program. And then recognition. This is at the governor's office. We have these plaques made out of reclaimed lumber. A company called Found Wood on the North Shore of Oahu sort of refurbishes old wood and then engraves the plaques. And many of the businesses come back time and time again because they always want to improve their scores, and there's some friendly competition going on as well. This is a restaurant in the building next to mine called Artisan. And I just was going to go through a few case studies so you could see what this actually means. These are some of the initiatives they've implemented, and some of it has to do with employee and behavior change. As Andrew was talking about, that's a big part of it, as well as using recyclable containers and separating cardboard, just some basic things. And another one, a medium-sized restaurant from Australia, Bill's Sydney in Waikiki, is in a LEED building, and its owner actually has this very strong commitment to the environment and to health and wellness, as well as to giving back to the community. So some of these things on the bottom bullet, are actually examples of what they're doing. Some more things. This is a really beautiful restaurant if you're ever in Waikiki. They have a lot of natural daylight and ventilation, natural ventilation. And then this is, that's weird. I don't know what happened. Anyway, this says Monkey Pod Kitchen by Merriman. So Peter Merriman is a chef in Hawaii that has restaurants on all of the islands. If you ever get to a Merriman's, you'll probably not be disappointed. But basically, this is his whole mission here, giving back to the community and leaving the world a better place. So it's a pretty good mission to have, and he's been very successful. And these are some of the items that they've implemented at Monkey Pod Kitchen. This one is in Ko'olina. And then the 10 entry-level checklist already went by. It's a checklist for sort of the low-hanging fruit for smaller restaurants and food service entities that aren't able to complete the full-blown checklist. One of our interns worked at a small restaurant, gave her boss that big restaurant checklist to complete, and they started to go through it, and they just got really depressed because they weren't doing very much, and though they wanted to do a lot. So basically, I had her, and we worked together to develop this 10 entry-level program, which really gives credit to sort of starting off and giving people some recognition for what they're doing, a starting point, and to sort of like prod them to do more. I'm not going to go through this. You have the checklist coming around. But basically, they're energy and water, recycling, recycled content, those sorts of things. This is Banan. We just did a walkthrough of this small restaurant across from the University of Hawaii. It's a banana-based soft serve. I don't know if any of you have had it. It's really good. The surfer, Carissa Moore, this world-famous woman surfer, she and her friends opened this place up, and now they have 5 outlets throughout the state, and it's really good. It's really good stuff. And they've really done some really exciting things. So this is from their UH location across from the University of Hawaii, and they've used lumber from Reuse Hawaii, reclaimed wood, to furnish their entire seating area. They're really walking the talk, and they work farm to table and table to farm. So you can see that they get their products from local farmers, and then they compost and sort of send this stuff back to either the farms or to pig farmers. And then they try to use to-go-ware that is recycled content, bio-based. And then their papaya boats. You can actually eat as much as you can of the papaya and then just throw away the skin when you're done. And that goes to composting as well. They also have set out recycling, trash, and composting. The green events, thank you, Mary. Green events checklist also was developed by one of our interns. There's a Green Meetings Industry Council, but you have to pay to join and be a member to get their resources. And when we started to do events, we didn't have the money to do that. And so one of our interns just researched this and developed the Green Event Checklist, which has become very popular. It's a great way of getting started in going green for different businesses and nonprofits. And this is a list of some of the green events that have gotten recognized. a real range of types and sizes of events, as well as some really large ones, like for 10,000 at the Hawaii Convention Center. That's an IUCN event at the top. Also, Sony Open has participated for 3 years, and they've improved every year by doing more. And then the TEDx Honolulu, we have a video on our website of this green event that one of our interns did. And then for the hotels, the hotel sector, Ala Moana Hotel is right next to the shopping center and also near the convention center. It's very popular with the residents as well as visitors. And so this sort of goes through some of the things they've done. Recently, their chief engineer was able to get their hotel through first doing an energy audit, then energy studies and tracking energy usage. He was able to get their hotel energy efficient chillers, cooling towers, and air handlers. But because of where they're located, they actually had to use like a helicopter and a crane to get it into the building. It was quite precarious, but they were successful. This is a historic hotel in Waikiki. It's called the Royal Hawaiian Resort, the Pink Lady, and it, even as a historic building, can achieve green Energy Star LEED and our Green Business Program certified. And I guess it ranks amongst some of the highest in the Starwood chain for energy efficiency. And then the last hotel I'm going to talk about is from the Aqua Aloha Hotel in Waikiki. It's a very small hotel with some timeshare units, and they put in those card key systems. So when you check in, you get the card key, which you put into a slot when you get into your room, and it activates the electrical parts. And they've been able to save quite a bit of energy and money through that. Some of our recent awardees, just thought I'd show you. It really ranges, a lot of hotels and venues, some restaurants and retail and office, and a lot of green events. So why participate? These are the benefits. Because there is no fee involved, businesses get public recognition for things that the public wouldn't otherwise know about, things they don't usually advertise about. And so I think this is one positive thing that comes out of it. They're able to attract the new generation of environmentally conscious travelers, as well as establish a good relationship with the regulators, such as DOH. They're providing a safer workplace for their employees, and they receive free compliance assistance from us. They also are able to display their plaques and show that they're a sustainable leader in Hawaii. So as far as green marketing goes, these are some of the things that we've been able to do with our program throughout the years. I'm not going to read them. The pauhanas in Hawaii are like a happy hour mixer where you're able to informally gather after work over drinks and what we call pupus or hors d'oeuvres. And basically, the next pauhana that we're doing is with the Surf Rider Foundation. We're going to collaborate with their ocean-friendly restaurant program at a hotel that has been recognized maybe 4 times in the Green Business Program, and 4 of their restaurants are getting recognized by the Ocean-Friendly Restaurant Program. So there's some synchronicity and collaboration and sort of mutual benefit to that. And then again, word of mouth. This is some of the results after our website sort of became its own place instead of buried within our Energy Office website. And we've gotten some visits nationally and internationally, excuse me. Social media is very important, as we all know. And so we have someone in our office who posts a number of different items on our program. And then upcoming events. So the Green Event Toolkit is on our website, accessible. 10 entry-level checklist is also on the website. The one for hotels and offices will be on the website, as well as our new checklists and scorecards will be available after the next award ceremony. We're also looking forward to having a part-time intern or 2, which will really help us. It's always been great to have them around. And then upcoming events this summer and fall are just listed below. And this is a shot from the latest Build and Buy Green site tours on the Big Island, the west side of Hawaii. at Palamanui UH. This is where the shot was taken. And so doing these things really builds community. There are people that were on this tour that now want to go on this year's tour that's going to Kauai. And so everybody's really excited about seeing net zero energy, green building, and on the Big Island we saw a living building as well at Kauai Prep Academy. This is just a quick video and then I'll do. So one of our interns developed this whole thing.
In Hawaiian, Kulia Ikanu'u means to strive to reach the summit. And with any journey, it starts with that first step and the motivation to embark on a path. In Hawaii, we are truly blessed with abundant natural resources that provide us with renewable, clean energy. However, we have found that not everyone knows where to gain the resources needed to take that first step. The Hawaii Green Business Program first began in 2002 and is a collaboratory effort between the Hawaii State Energy Office Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, Department of Health, and the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. It has since helped and recognized over 80 businesses that strive to operate in an environmentally and socially responsible manner. The steps to participate in this program are simple and free. First, fill out a checklist related to your business type, found at energy.hawaii.gov. Second, participate in a site visit. And lastly, be recognized. Through every step of the way, we have professionals that will help guide you through the process and provide information, referrals, and resources to reduce energy usage and waste. As we strive to reach the summit, we must work together to reach our goal of making Hawaii energy independent. So, you ready to join us?
Anyway, these interns are fabulous. The intern that worked on this developed all of it. He did it all on his own. He didn't know how to do it before he actually took on the task. He's like, oh, don't worry, I can figure it out. And he did. So anyway, thank you, Cash. That was his name. So this is my contact information. I also wanted to mention I just ran into someone that I know from another life, Lucy from the Guam Energy Office, right? We've known each other. She used to come to Honolulu for meetings. This is my first time here on Guam, and so I was very surprised to see her, and she's surprised to see me. But anyway, it's really, when we were talking about all the various themes of this conference, I really think it comes down to people, relationships, collaborating and building partners, being patient and positive, and persistent. Because I've been doing this for over 20 years, and my boss still asks me, how can you still be so optimistic? And I was like, what other way is there to be? So anyway, I think it's going to be very exciting to hear about Mary's program, and thank you all for listening to this today.
Thank you, Gail, so much. That was so great. And it's perfect how you described what you said about people and relationships and collaborating, because this is the Collaborate and Innovate track. And so I think what you've heard Andrew and Gail both talk about has been a lot about the data and being used for the marketing aspect for corporations, because corporations want to have the corporate social responsibility, the CSR aspect. And so how much that data will help, and the partnerships. So now we're actually going to go to our next speaker. And where'd it go? Mary, I had it might be in your stuff. Oh, thank you. Okay, and Senator Clint Margell has joined us. Thank you so much. He's here as our legislative track. Excellent. I'm gonna put my glasses on because it's a little small font. That's what happens when you get, you know, the older eyes. So Mary Rose was born and raised here on Guam, and she graduated from Notre Dame High School before receiving her BA from Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, with a double major in PR and marketing. So she really is a PR marketing guru, though, with having that. So she's received her master's, her MBA from the University of Guam, and she's married to Christopher, and they have 2 kids, Kieran and Gabrielle. She's in her 13th year as the president of the Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association, which is a private, nonprofit trade association that promotes the highest standards of service and quality in the industry while improving business, community relations, and publicizing the value and benefits of the island's visitor industry to Guam's economy. A leader in the tourism industry, Mary oversees 7 active committees for the GHRA and focuses on training and education, workforce development, destination management, safety and security, and a host of other things. And her bio is really, really impressive. And so she's going to be giving us the aspect from someone here on Guam. You've been hearing from the different sectors that are involved in this. And so now let's please give a warm welcome for Mary.
Thank you so much. I would like to just kind of get a feel in the room because, you know, it's so exciting. I think PIEC in its 30th year brings everybody from different parts of the world around the Pacific region especially, and I'd like to just get a show of hands for those who are visiting Guam and not from the island but still part of the conference. About implementation, I'm going to be looking to all of those who live here and work with us in making sure we do this, right? So especially since we do have somebody from our legislature who is actually not just from Guam, but has roots in another island family. And then we also have 2 of our key educators who are here with us today. We have Dr. Fred Schumann, who is the director of the tourism program at the University of Guam. And then we have Mr. Norman Aguilar, who is not just a family member of Gail's co-worker and who started this program in Hawaii, but he actually was our former director of tourism, but still teaches, and he's with the Guam Community College. So those are our 2 post-secondary educational institutes, and I think that's extremely important because when you talk about public-private partnerships, most people think of government agencies only, which I really appreciate Guam EPA being here. And I worked with Conchita when I first started in 2006, and we talked about this kind of stuff a long time ago. We actually produced an environmental management systems book, but it was held internally only within engineering. So I'm very excited to kind of talk a little bit about green marketing and what we need to do on Guam so we can continue to make things happen, because I think that's the greatest, one of the biggest deliverables from this conference is we all need to walk away with programs that either we're excited about and want to continue the discussion, but more importantly, start implementing change, real change, and get things going so that we can produce results that we're all proud of, and we can have sustainability within each program. So green marketing really is requiring our willingness. We all have to want for that change to happen. And sometimes, maybe 10 years ago, we weren't ready for change. People weren't ready to talk about, disposable or reusable types of things. And we know that plastic bags came up like last year. I know that GHRA has brought up with the same senator who proposed the plastic bags initiative as part of the Zero Waste Initiative is we brought up styrofoam. This year is just working with our distributors to stop bringing in styrofoam in general. So there's a lot of things we can all do, either privately or professionally, and it really is about aligning yourselves with the right people, the right partners who can get things done, but really strategizing and putting your goals into action. And so it's extremely important that we look to our neighboring islands as well. I know that there have been some really great presentations from other Pacific islands and here throughout the week, and there are a lot of good examples of what they've done differently. And I've been hearing a lot like, why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? Or why are we hearing only this, from the islands of Palau, for example, or from Hawaii? And it's not that we can't, it's just sometimes you have to want to really go there. Some people really love ideas, but they don't want to put the work towards it. And as our first panelist had mentioned, sometimes you just start with something and it'll grow. So similar to how Gail started her program, they only had 4 hotels at the time, and now with over 50, with over 100 businesses, let's give her a round of applause, because that 17-year commitment of almost 20 is actually producing results, and they've expanded into so many other things. Okay, that works. So I would like to just explain a little bit about GHRA. I know it was in my bio, but GHRA has been around 47 years on the island. So we started in 1972, and it was primarily created by the hotels to serve as a government liaison to work with government agencies like Guam EPA. And so like a specific program we work with them on is like the pesticides training. And so we bring in training within internally, so our engineering department can train, or even our HR people can train all of those who come in contact with pesticides, that they're properly educated, but also they're protecting the environment, our guests, and even themselves. And so that's an example of how we work with government agencies with regards to regulations. But it is our mission, so that's our mission statement at the top. And if you look at that, really for a nonprofit, non-government organization, most people don't realize we are not Guam Visitors Bureau. We are Guam Hotel and Restaurant Association. We're paid for directly by our membership. And I'd actually like to recognize the youth member who is on the board of the Guam Visitors Bureau. We have Florian de la Cruz. Florian is a product of UOG, product of GCC. She continued on to go to UOG. She actually was my intern. And I was lucky to have her as one of my students too at the University of Guam. So she's moved on. She's actually at GBB and she's a board member. So it's really great to see our youth get involved and be recognized at that level. But GHRA has different initiatives, and our objectives are really to promote the highest standards of service and quality. And so when you talk about green marketing, it's only going to improve standards and service. And when you're competing within Asia or any other market, whether it's Croatia or Bali, those travelers are looking for ways of how you're having to deal with tourism, whether you're making a positive impact to your environment, whether you have alternatives that are being considered and you're not looking at waste. They want to have a great experience while they're there. And so some people are starting to get very, very really opinionated about what they would like to see as they travel. They don't want to see waste, and they want to see that you're managing the destination. If you don't know, there was an island, very popular island in the Philippines, was closed for, I believe, 6 months. And Boracay just opened last year, reopened, and they have so many rules and regs now because of the issues that they were dealing with sewage. Also, Palau just reopened, and I was just there in February. They just reopened Jellyfish Lake for closing it off for 2 years. And that was a commitment on their part by the governments to make sure that those places that our tourists frequent will be there for generations to come. And so they did the responsible thing by saying, we understand, we value our tourists, but right now they can't go to these places. They can go to other places until we start to make it sustainable. And we're correcting some of the errors we've made as in better managing the destination. So the second one is really, it ties it all in with what we do as an organization, where we advocate with government agencies and also with the senators and the governor and government of Guam when we advocate for issues to protect the industry, but also to grow the industry, and also to understand why we're implementing new rules. Like this week, I know that there was radon certification, and now there are 2 bills in front of the legislature regarding radon. Tomorrow, we have the public hearing on minimum wage going up. So there's a lot that we tackle, and there's a lot that we interact on with regards to government that GHRA really does serve a much bigger role than most people actually realize. So it's very important for us to start setting the standard for the industry, because if we don't do it, we know that individual businesses do it because it's just the smart thing to do. They think, for example, you saw the one with the banana. there is a new cafe on Guam, and they are actually working with plant-based products, and they're doing something similar. So I think we need to reward those companies who are actually thinking about the environment, but they're integrating it in their whole mission as a company, and they're really walking the talk, and they're able to really deliver on something on a consistent basis. And I think a lot of times, whether you've ever tried to be in sales, retail, marketing, or even purchasing, a lot of times people forget how hard things are. We can't be able to resource certain products because we import everything. Well, there are a lot of entrepreneurs now who aren't importing everything. We've actually, GHRA, another example where we worked with UOG is the Cooperative Extension Program. We worked with them to identify the entire import listing of all fruits and vegetables on the island. What we did was, we shared that information with the farmers so that they can understand their pricing and where they need to be competitive if they were to resell to a hotel or a grocery store. And so that really opened up the eyes of the farmers to, one, be more competitive pricing, but also to understand what's being ordered the most as far as production and quantity. And third, also seasonality of the items that grow, because there are certain things that just can't grow year round. But also there are opportunities where sometimes bananas, for example, strawberries, other things, they don't grow year round out of California and places like that. So there's opportunities where we can step in and locally produce items that just are really difficult to get during certain periods, like avocado, right? You know, avocado can grow year round here. So it was really a tool and a guide for our farmers to identify things that they can get year round. So with that in mind, it really is important that we get information from those who are in the front line. And that's why the committees that Dania had mentioned are extremely important. So we actually have committees that are modeled after a hotel, for example, the different operations. And this is how we meet on a regular basis. So we meet monthly, and for example, especially for Guam EPA, our engineering and environmental committee, we discuss upcoming legislative or regulatory issues. We talk about compliance and regulatory concerns. Also licensing and certification. I just talked to Derry in the back about pesticides training. And so there's a lot that we talk about internally, even like the new polls and regs that are being considered at the legislature. There's a lot that impacts the way we conduct business, and the more we're ahead of it and build advocacy and have relationships with our agencies, the better we can educate our members and get everybody prepared on how to comply. And everybody thinks we fight things all the time, but it is really about compliance. And once you work towards compliance, we work on education and training and certification. Because that's the other role we play, is not just advocacy, but actually provide training and certification programs so that people can do their jobs. But it's really through the committees that we get a lot of information. And with that, we think of the guest in mind and how we improve services. And so a lot of that, I had mentioned some of the islands that have been going through some things. And so it's looking inward of what we need to do, but also looking outward on how we need to deliver based on what our guests expect. So this is the graph that, or the image that we use to kind of describe how we operate as an organization. But if you look at it, the center is really the guest, our customer. So what happened when we looked at Gail's program in Hawaii? And as she mentioned, we're really lucky because we actually reviewed her documents earlier this year in January in our annual planning meeting. And it was purely coincidental that when I was meeting with Conchita earlier this year, she said, oh, by the way, Gail's gonna be here on Guam and she's gonna present. She's one of our panelists. And so it was just a blessing, a true blessing to connect us on this and to find out it is an open source. They looked at other markets like San Francisco to develop theirs. And that's what really it's about with public-private partnerships is a lot of times You never know where you're going to get your inspirations from, but especially the hard work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. They do a lot of things with points, and they have a lot of things that took them almost 18 years to get to. What we're looking at introducing, what we piloted on Tuesday, earlier this week, where Gail spoke at our membership meeting, is really a document which we can have Gail pass around. This is actually her copy, so if you can just review it throughout the presentation. Just to get a sense, it is a piloted product, so it's still in draft form. We don't want to finalize it until the end of summer. August 27th is our anniversary, so we're going to be releasing the final product at that time. But we wanted to have something delivered during PIEC to say we are committed to this. We're also going to create programs out of it, and every committee within GHRA is going to identify 1 or 2 things that they implement on an annual basis, so that we can start collecting data, for measuring ourselves on performance, and start looking forward to some bigger initiatives, and help everybody also get some of the funding that they need so that we can implement and start making some real positive changes. So at our annual planning meeting, we were able to look at the best practices through Gail's documents with the Department of Energy, and by launching what we had sent out, this one document, on Tuesday, we are setting the standard, at least developing the standard and setting the standard, so we all have something to refer to. And then we look forward to implementing that change and having a sustainable program that we can incorporate and integrate different things with both what the government agencies have in place as well as what we create for ourselves. So, as most of you know, a lot of times, our senators, they pass laws that may or may not agree with. So a lot of people will say, oh gosh, the first thing is, some of our engineers are like, oh my goodness, are we going to be required to do all of this? At what time frame, in 2025, 2030, like, do we have to get 50% of this done? I mean, that's the first reaction. And they're extremely happy to know it's a voluntary program. And we do have annual awards ceremonies in March that recognize sustainability within the industry. And so we are going to start this off with, again, a voluntary program, and identify the committees on 1 or 2 things that they can commit to on an annual basis, and then recognize them at our sustainability awards. Now, if there are things we need to take charge of, like styrofoam, for example, and work with the legislature and with Guam EPA, and work on other zero waste initiatives that we've talked about with Conchita, then we can work towards regulatory affairs and really lobby for some things that make sense. But GHRA always prides itself in trying to set the standard and get everybody to work together and understand the impact of what we're trying to accomplish, and maybe get some pilot programs going. So if you guys don't know, for example, this week, tomorrow morning, Guam EPA is conducting their food waste audit with Jacobs Engineering here at the Hyatt Regency Guam. Also, Hotel Nico Guam is going through an energy audit with Guam EPA. They got retrofitted with some equipment with Siemens out of Alaska. And so that's happening so that they can also do their first energy audit. So there's a lot going on. There's some things that we put together for this book. Like within this book, we actually also put the events and purchasing recommendations for procurement, on how to also involve your distributors, on how to make sure that you're not creating more waste. So there's a lot of things that's really integrated, and it is important that we find funding sources, because as much as we like to think it's the right thing to do, we also want to make sure that there are economic benefits to it, right? Where our members and our companies are incentivized to do certain things as well. That's where you're going to get some real change on it. But this is a program actually that was launched earlier this year. So in addition to green programs, we're looking at conservation efforts. So we also added our reef conservation program that we have with Bureau of Statistics and Plans with the coral reefs. And so that is a program funded through NOAA, And I know Mallory Morgan, her program with NOAA was actually featured earlier this week in a breakout session in a pre-conference workshop. So we created, sorry, I went backwards. So we actually tried to put in a lot of different things in that one book, and it is still subject to revisions. Again, we don't want to have a full launch until we've had feedback from all of our members. It's gone out to all the general managers for hotels and restaurants. I think it'll be good to probably send it out to GCC and UOG just for your, cursory review and any recommendations you want to make. So we did pilot it. We also put out some additional things, like we really want to get into audits, but not so much so somebody can come in and do an audit for you, unless it is federally funded or it's a partnership we do with somebody that's sponsored. But we also created like a safety audit. It's actually a form of the top 10 violations with OSHA, for example. And this is done on a peer-to-peer group so that they can do self-policing on their own. And we actually have a certified industrial hygienist and a certified safety professional who gives that advice and will work with you if you need to make any changes. So as much as we give you guidelines, we're trying to also provide the resources available to you so you can implement things. These are the marketing communications that we have. We have member meetings. Every month we have committee meetings. Every quarter we have membership meetings. But also we have tons of events and fundraisers. Next year, April 2020, is our Pacific Hotel Restaurant Expo. And what we want to do is invite all the distributors around the Pacific region who have products to offer or services that's related to sustainability and our green guidelines to bring them here in April 2020 so that they could be featured at FAIR. So we're trying to have an extension of this and really live the guidebook and have real programs associated with it. We also participate a lot with media, with articles and interviews. Of course, we send things out. We also have some social media platforms. And then we are going to be releasing a lot more information as we implement programs through our committee level. Sorry, that's the workforce development. So the reason why I had some workforce development, which running out of time, but I won't add that in, but I just want you to know that it's not just the hard assets of a building and facilities, right? It's also workforce development. Sorry, can you go backwards? There. You've got to have sustainability even within your people and train them. And so that's why we've also added what we're doing on an educational piece. And these are the partners of who's really responsible for educating our students. We have local programs with Department of Education, even with the Tourism Education Council, which are responsible for the younger children. And in the high schools, we have GCC that focus on vocations and internships. And then within apprenticeship, and we just launched pre-apprenticeship 2 months ago here on Guam. That is only a 12-week course and focusing on certification programs. That is being conducted by GCC, UOG now for the Allied Health. I heard that they're doing one program for Allied Health. And then also GHRA is implementing it on a hotel and a restaurant-based school. And then also with UOG having the post-secondary programs, I think that's really important, especially when we look to our leaders and our managers of the industry. But more importantly for us, it's the private sector. Private sector has to be ready to provide the jobs, conduct the training, and look for professional development with on-the-job training. And so that's a program we're actually launching in August with our first cohort. And we're looking to take advantage of the grant we just were a part of. I wrote this grant with DOL 2 years ago. And so we've received $1.7 million in funding through October 2020. And that's the program UOG is part of, Trades Academy, and GHRA. And we have all created our different pre-apprenticeship programs. And so we're very excited because this is not a long-term 2-year, 4-year program. This is 12-week certification courses that you can get through American Hotel Lodging Association as well as National Restaurant Association. And it's really for front of the house, back of the house staff. So we're very excited because it all ties into our sustainability initiatives. And so if you have any questions, I know that they're going to have a panel, right, of questions? Okay, so thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. So we have a few minutes for questions. I know folks might be thinking we're running out of time, but we don't. I'll make sure we end on time or a few minutes early so folks can get ready to get for the buses so we can get out in time for the night at the museum. So Andrew is still with us. We have Gail and Mary. So I think, is that a hand for a question? All right. So when I come to you, can you please stand and let us know who you are?
Yes. I'm Chip Gard from the National Weather Service. And this is Jenny she's the boss lady. And I just wanted to say that Mary, she didn't mention the fact that they coordinate a lot, the safety, the weather reports when we have tropical cyclones in the area. She coordinates the information out to all the hotels in the area. And so the one thing that I noticed was missing was the government agency interface. And so so we do training with Mary and stuff like that to educate as well the people here on in the Hotel and Restaurant Association.
That's great. No, I think all three speakers did talk so much about the partnership and working together in terms of the fiscal regulators, like in Hawaii being either the energy office or the Department of Health, where the environmental side is. So I think it's a really big key factor for that. Did anybody want to respond to that, or are we good, or Mary?
So maybe relating it to it is, do you think we need to add like an emergency response type of training as part of this guidebook?
You had safety and security.
Right.
And probably included in that.
Well, we're focusing more on occupational health and safety, but we can certainly add in a security part because emergency ops is usually given to like HR or engineering or security. But there isn't always one main person in charge of it because it's a whole team. So that's something we could take back and put in, because that's certainly for business continuity, we need that. And so we don't really have a program set aside, but we do have emergency planning as part of our key initiatives.
Other questions? I know for any of our speakers, is everybody getting tired? You guys have that. Oh, here we go. Timothy, let me come over to you. Also, you shouldn't be getting tired with all that chocolate that was out there.
Hi, Timothy Hood with EPA. I'm super excited to hear about your plans. And I wanted to ask Gail, what kinds of outreach are you seeing the hotels and businesses doing when they win your awards? Is it like internal or lots of external, lots of social media, or not much?
Oh, hold on a second. I'll give you the mic so everybody can hear you.
Thanks, Timothy, for that question. That's a really good one. Sometimes the hotels are so excited about getting the award. Before the ceremony, they're like, oh, we're doing a press release. Can we have our marketing team contact you? And what we do is we put together a press packet. So we do that for them. But if they're professionals and have their own team, they want to get on it right away. And oftentimes those press releases get picked up in the like hospitality magazines or the Pacific Business News. And so they kind of do marketing on their own. They're very proud of it, and we have to tell them, could you just wait till the ceremony so you don't upstage like the governors? So sometimes that happens, but yeah, it's been really great. Their enthusiasm for it has been fabulous.
Hey, Andrew, this is Danya. I do have a question for you. It's sort of maybe your next steps with maybe some additional corporations. You obviously mentioned Sodexo and Aramark, but are there others that you guys are having on engaging with?
Yes. So, I think we focused a lot on the food service world, but increasingly also on the hospitality world. And I was really excited to hear the other two speakers today talk a lot about some of the engagement in the hospitality area, because there's so much, frankly, food waste in a lot of the hotel world and a lot of opportunity to do much about it. So that's definitely an area where we're working. The other area that we're spending time is looking at prepared food and grocery, which is increasingly looking more like a restaurant in many cases, and looking at ways to help in those environments as well. And then, within food service, it tends to be a lot of colleges and hospitals and corporate dining facilities, and as well as some military installations and senior living operations, things like that. So basically, I would say the prime zone for working on food waste is places that have a lot of food they prepare in advance of service, and they don't know how many people are going to show up. So those are where that happens. That's where we're focusing.
So this is Mary from GHRA. I'm actually interested in your, I think it was an iPad, with your Lean Path tracker in collecting data, because I did get information from Guam EPA and Jacobs Engineering's numbers on what the food waste is on our island. For those that they interviewed, just so everybody knows, 37% comes from hotels, food waste, 27% from restaurants, 21% from distributors and cafeterias and contractors, and 15% from the grocery stores. So that's the makeup of our food waste. And considering hotels and restaurants make up 64%, I think it would be, now that we have this number from Jacobs Engineering as well as Guam EPA, I think it's a great benchmark to start measuring ourselves against. But I would be really interested in working with you to get access to the tracker so that we can implement that within our membership, so they can start doing daily tracking. And I'm gonna bring it up at the food waste audit tomorrow.
Great. Hey, we'd love to help however we can. Thank you.
And so the food waste is a national issue, obviously, and I saw Timothy nodding your head back there. It's something we're all really passionate about. Our association's been working with EPA for a number of years. I know, Andrew, you mentioned ReFed in your earlier presentation this morning. That's a great also organization, what they've done. EPA has a bunch of that information on their website. ASOMO has a whole food waste page that has a lot of information. Again, we represent all 50 states, 5 territories in the District of Columbia, so you can see what our 56 members are doing when it comes to this. It's something I'm really passionate about too, Andrew, and quick story, we just held our mid-year meeting on May 1st and 2nd in New Jersey, and we had an event off-site, and I was asking us to take the leftover food. They said we couldn't take it off property, and I'm like, you're wrong, nobody's getting in trouble, giving them the whole Emerson Act, blah, 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 blah. And I got into a little bit of a fight with the people. But I won, and we took the food to Catholic Charities. So it just goes to show you that you can do something and make a positive impact on somebody, because I think, Andrew, correct me, I think 1 in 4 kids are insecure, 1 in 9 or 1 in 10 adults in this country, those the stats.
I think it's 15% overall in food insecurity. I don't know the breakdown between children and adults, but it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I think
clearly excess edible food should not be going in the garbage.
Right, so I think it's something we can all be passionate about. So I think it's something with GHRA that can work on. It's really great. You've seen what they're doing, obviously, with some of the wonderful restaurants and that in Hawaii is something that we can do all around this world. So I think what we're going to do is, it's about 4:10, we're going to give a few minutes to the senator for some closing remarks, and unless there's any more burning questions, if not, but you've heard so many great things today about being innovative, collaborating with people that are outside of maybe your normal structure, getting out of your comfort zones, and working together. It's so important to talk to folks, be collaborative, be innovative, the partnerships, data. And the one thing I do want to say for folks is data really does matter, but when I just see numbers, I'm like, okay, what does that mean? So when I hear like, well, we have diverted 27 million tons of this, give me a picture. Like, that's gonna fill like 10 soccer fields or 10 football fields. It's something that's really visual to people that's gonna help them. So if it's just numbers, it's boring. I mean, it's great numbers, but it's not helping us get the message across, because what we talked about so much was messaging and helping to market what corporate folks are doing. So with that, one more round of applause for our 3 wonderful speakers.
Thank you. All right, I just want to say thank you, everyone. I was really happy to be a part of this conference and be here and just participate in it and listen to everyone and the efforts that you're all making, including the GHRA. I ran a green campaign. My campaign slogan for my platform was actually to make Guam green again. And so it's kind of a playoff of, Trump's make America great again. So, and in doing that, I actually sort of put on my marketing hat. I'm not like a great marketeer or anything like that, but I do have some experience in the marketing field, and I came from the media. So from the media, one of the things we learned, and in journalism and communications, is an old phrase, the KISS methodology, right? Which is keep it simple, stupid, right? So I applied that when I was coming up with these ideas, because I have a lot of green initiatives that I believe in and I would like to see implemented. So when I was thinking, how do I get this message across to people, I thought, well, I gotta keep it simple. That's the basic thing. I gotta keep it as simple as possible. That's why I came up with an idea like, make Guam green again. I thought it would be simple, it would be catchy, and it would help market this idea. And then I came up with 5 green pillars, right? And we're running out of time, so I'll just go through some real quick. Green with, and so how I said it is I would say, make Guam green again. You know, how? Green with agriculture. Then I would explain how agriculture, we need to develop an agricultural industry on Guam so we can be self-sustainable because we're importing 90% of our produce, and I think we need to start growing more of our produce so we become self-sustainable. Then there was a green with environmental protection. So I was thinking, how do I make this something, because the average person would think to themselves at home, like, what does environmental protection matter to me? I mean, so what? You cut some trees down, you did whatever, who cares, right? It doesn't affect my day-to-day life. So how I framed it was, what does affect people's day-to-day lives? Well, the economy, and what's a large, major driver of economy is tourism. And why do tourists come to Guam? They come to Guam because they want to see a beautiful tropical paradise. They're not going to have a beautiful tropical paradise if we lose it, if we cut down our trees, if we don't protect our water systems and everything else. If we don't protect the ecosystem, we'll lose this beautiful, beautiful place we have that attracts tourists here. And green with energy, that was another pillar of my platform. And I thought to myself, the same thing again. Why do people care about their carbon footprint or care about preventing emissions? Guam is not a great contributor to the overall scheme of emissions, but what is important to most people is their power bill. Everyone knows their power bills are very high, and it's a difficult thing to pay it for a lot of people. And the largest part of our power bill is actually the fuel component of the power bill. So going green with green energy, we can actually reduce that use of fuel and actually lower power costs for your power bill. In fact, solar energy now is producing power cheaper than oil. The LEAC rate on Guam is 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and solar companies can come in at 12 cents per kilowatt hour, some even lower. This recent contract they signed, GPA signed, is like 8 and 9 cents, which is pretty low. I'm not sure how they did it, but they got it down to 8 to 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So I framed it that way. This is why it should be important to you, is because it'll affect your power bill, and overall it improves the environment again, and again that's our #1 attraction for tourists, is to come to a beautiful island. So those were some of the pillars of my green platform, and I'm glad to hear that you guys are working on some things in that respect, and I'm looking forward to seeing is it STEP is the acronym? Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing that, and thank you very much everyone, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, let's keep it green, right? So definitely. So thank you guys so much for being an active audience, and thank you for listening to my call to come to the green marketing. Andrew, thanks so much. I'm so glad it worked out so well for this session, so I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and hopefully a nice museum.